The galaxy was vast, but humanity's place in it had become small and fragile. For centuries, the Exotherian Empire ruled over countless planets with an iron fist. They were tall, insect-like beings with shimmering exoskeletons and cold, calculating minds. Their ships roamed the stars like predators, ensuring no one dared to challenge their authority. Humanity once dreamed of exploring the universe, but those dreams were crushed under the weight of the Empire's tyranny. Now, Earth stood as the last bastion of human civilization, a pale shadow of its former self. On the outskirts of a quiet farming settlement near what used to be called Kansas, Daniel Carter worked tirelessly in his fields. The soil was dry and stubborn, much like the life he led now. Years ago, Daniel had been a soldier, fighting in skirmishes against smaller alien factions during humanity's brief period of expansion. But after losing friends and witnessing too much death, he chose to leave that life behind. He married Laura, a kind woman with a quiet strength, and together they raised their son, Ethan. Life was hard, but it was peaceful, or so they thought. Ethan was only 8 years old, full of curiosity and energy. His laughter often broke the monotony of long days spent tending crops. On this particular morning, while Daniel worked under the scorching sun, Ethan wandered off toward the edge of the field. Laura had warned him not to go too far, but the boy's adventurous spirit always got the better of him. Today, something unusual caught his eye. A strange object half buried in the dirt, glinting faintly in the sunlight. It looked like a piece of metal, twisted and scorched, unlike anything Ethan had ever seen. He knelt down to examine it closer, his small hands brushing away the dust. Unbeknownst to him, the object was no ordinary debris. It was a crashed Scytherian surveillance drone. These drones patrolled remote areas, gathering data on human activity. Normally, they avoided contact, but this one appeared damaged, its systems erratic. As Ethan leaned in, the drone suddenly whirred to life. Its sensors flickered, detecting movement. Before the boy could react, a sharp beam of light shot out from the device, striking him squarely in the chest. The force of the blast knocked him backward, leaving him motionless on the ground. Panic surged through the nearby fields as Daniel heard the commotion and sprinted toward the source. When he arrived, his heart shattered at the sight of his son lying lifeless, smoke rising from the wound. Word of the tragedy spread quickly throughout the settlement. People gathered around the Carters' home, murmuring in disbelief and anger. How could such a thing happen? Why would the Exotherians target a child? Laura clung to Ethan's body, her cries cutting through the air like knives. Daniel stood beside her, his fists clenched so tightly that his knuckles turned white. The pain was unbearable, but beneath it burned a growing fury. The local Scytherian governor, Marcus Phelan, was informed of the incident. When Laura demanded answers, accompanied by a group of settlers, Phelan dismissed her with chilling indifference. "Humans are reckless," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "If your child had stayed where he belonged, this would not have occurred." To him, Ethan's death was nothing more than collateral damage, a minor inconvenience unworthy of further discussion. But to humanity, it was the final straw. The Empire's cruelty had pushed them to the brink many times before, but this time felt different. This wasn't just about resources or territory. It was personal. Across Earth, people began to rise up, united by grief and rage. Protests erupted in cities, and whispers of rebellion filled the air. For Daniel and Laura, there was no turning back. What started as a family's tragedy was about to ignite a war that would change the fate of the galaxy forever. The death of Ethan Carter became a spark that lit a fire across Earth. News of the Scytherian drone's attack spread rapidly, carried by word of mouth, radio broadcasts, and underground networks. People everywhere were outraged. For years, humanity had endured the Empire's oppression in silence, too afraid to fight back. But now something inside them snapped. They couldn't remain silent any longer. Laura Carter refused to let her son's death be dismissed as an accident or forgotten. Though her heart was broken, She found strength she didn't know she had. Standing before a crowd of grieving neighbors in their small settlement, she spoke with a voice trembling yet determined. "They think we are nothing," she said, tears streaming down her face. "But we are human. We are alive. And we will not bow to monsters who see our children as expendable." Her words resonated deeply. Soon, images of Ethan, his smiling face, his bright eyes, were shared across towns and cities. He became a symbol of all that humanity had lost under the Empire's rule. Posters bearing his picture appeared on walls, accompanied by simple but powerful messages. Never again. We are not afraid. Freedom for humanity. Daniel watched as his wife transformed into a leader, someone people looked up to for guidance and hope. At first, he struggled to reconcile this new version of Laura with the gentle woman he loved. But seeing her courage reignited something within him. The soldier he once was, the man who had vowed never to take up arms again, began to stir beneath the surface. Still, doubt lingered in his mind. Could they really stand against the mighty Exitherian Empire? Would revenge bring Ethan back? Amidst the growing unrest, a young engineer named Mia Torres emerged as a key figure. She worked in secret, hidden away in an old warehouse on the outskirts of a crumbling city. Her workspace was cluttered with tools, wires, and scraps of metal salvaged from abandoned ships and machines. Mia wasn't just tinkering for fun. She was building something revolutionary, a plasma cannon powered by quantum energy. It was risky, untested technology, but if it worked, it could level the playing field between humans and the Empire. Mia's invention caught the attention of Alex Monroe, a charismatic politician known for rallying communities during tough times. Alex believed the humanity's scattered resistance movements needed unity to succeed. He traveled tirelessly, meeting with leaders from different regions, urging them to put aside their differences and join forces. Alongside him was Ryan Brooks, a former space pilot with a haunted past. Ryan had fought in humanity's last major rebellion decades ago, a disastrous campaign that ended in defeat and left scars both physical and emotional. Yet even he felt compelled to act when he saw how determined people were this time around. Together, Alex and Ryan helped form the United Earth Coalition, UEC, a group dedicated to organizing humanity's fight against the Empire. When Mia presented her prototype weapon to the coalition, skepticism filled the room. Many doubted whether such a device could work. Others worried about the resources required to build more. But Maya stood firm, explaining how her design could pierce the thick armor of Exitherian warships. "This isn't just a weapon," she said. "It's our chance to show them we won't go quietly." The UEC agreed to support Mia's project, provided she could train others to replicate her work. Factories that once produced farming equipment were repurposed to manufacture parts for the cannons. Volunteers poured in, eager to contribute however they could. Some helped assemble weapons, while others prepared food or cared for wounded fighters. Even children played a role, gathering scrap metal and delivering messages. As preparations intensified, Daniel found himself drawn deeper into the movement. Laura urged him to use his military experience to train recruits. At first, he hesitated, remembering the horrors of war he'd tried so hard to escape. But one night, as he sat alone staring at Ethan's photograph, he realized there was no other choice. If staying peaceful meant allowing the Empire to continue its brutality, then peace was no longer an option. Training camps sprang up across Earth, each filled with men and women ready to risk everything for freedom. Among them were farmers, teachers, mechanics, ordinary people united by extraordinary resolve. As they drilled and practiced, stories of their efforts reached the ears of the Exitherians. Governor Marcus Phelan dismissed these reports as insignificant. To him, humanity's uprising was little more than a nuisance, a fleeting moment of chaos that would soon be crushed. Little did he know, the seeds of rebellion had already taken root, spreading far beyond what anyone anticipated. The United Earth Coalition, UEC, began to grow stronger with each passing day. People from all corners of the planet joined the cause. bringing with them skills, ideas, and an unshakable determination. Alex Monroe worked tirelessly to unite the fractured groups that had once fought among themselves. He traveled across continents, speaking to farmers, factory workers, and even former criminals who wanted a chance to make things right. His message was simple but powerful. We are one people, and together, we can stand against anything. Ryan Brooks played a crucial role as well. With his experience as a pilot, he trained volunteers to fly ships salvaged from old wars or built from scraps. Many of these vessels were outdated and barely functional, but Ryan taught the recruits how to squeeze every ounce of performance out of them. He often reminded his students, it's not about having the best ship, it's about knowing how to use what you've got. Though haunted by memories of past failures, Ryan found solace in seeing the fire in the eyes of those willing to fight for their freedom. Mia Torres continued to refine her plasma cannon design, working late into the night by candlelight. Her hands were calloused from handling tools, and her face was streaked with grease, but she didn't care. Every time someone doubted her work, she pushed harder, determined to prove them wrong. When the first batch of cannons rolled off the assembly line, they were far from perfect. Some overheated after a single shot, others misfired entirely. But Maya refused to give up. She adjusted blueprints, tested new materials, and encouraged her team to keep trying. Slowly but surely, the weapons improved. Meanwhile, Laura Carter became a symbol of hope for millions. Her speeches reached people through smuggled broadcasts and handwritten pamphlets. She spoke not just of vengeance, but of a future where humanity could live without fear. Ethan wasn't just my son, she told a crowd gathered in a bombed-out square. He was every child, every dream, every life stolen by the Empire. We fight so no mother has to bury her child again. Her words inspired countless others to join the rebellion, including families who had lost loved ones to the Xetherians' cruelty. Daniel struggled to adjust to his new role as a trainer. Teaching civilians how to handle weapons felt unnatural to him, especially since many of them had never held a gun before. Some were eager learners, while others trembled at the thought of taking a life. Daniel tried to focus on practical lessons, how to aim, how to stay calm under pressure, but it was hard not to think about the cost of war. One evening, as he watched a group of teenagers practice drills, he turned to Ryan and asked, "Do you really think we can win?" Ryan hesitated before answering. "Winning isn't guaranteed," he admitted. "But if we don't try, we're already dead. Sometimes you have to take a stand, even when the odds are stacked against you." As the UEC prepared for battle, spies within the Empire provided valuable information. A network of informants, led by a quiet man named Sam Welch, risked their lives to gather intelligence. They reported that the Xetherians viewed Earth's uprising as a minor nuisance, unworthy of serious attention. Governor Valon believed humanity would crumble under the weight of its own disorganization. This arrogance gave the rebels a sliver of hope. If they could strike quickly and decisively, they might catch the Empire off guard. Back in the training camps, excitement mixed with fear. Recruits practiced combat scenarios, ran drills, and studied maps of potential targets. Among them was a young woman named Jenna Cole, who had left her village to join the fight. She carried a small locket containing a picture of her younger brother, taken by the Empire during a raid years ago. For Jenna, this war was personal. Like so many others, she dreamed of a day when humanity would no longer live in fear. Despite the challenges ahead, a sense of unity began to emerge. People who had once distrusted one another now shared meals, stories, and laughter around campfires. They came from different backgrounds, spoke different languages, and held different beliefs, but they were bound together by a common goal: freedom. As the sun set over the makeshift camps, casting long shadows across the land, it was clear that humanity was ready to rise. The question remained, would their courage be enough to topple an empire? The United Earth Coalition, UEC, launched its first attack under the cover of darkness. It was a risky move, But the rebels knew they couldn't wait any longer. The Exatherian Empire's arrogance had left gaps in their defenses, and the UEC intended to exploit them. Their target was a convoy of supply ships orbiting Earth, carrying vital resources that kept the Empire's forces running smoothly. If they succeeded, it would send a clear message: humanity was no longer afraid. Mayator's plasma cannons played a key role in the mission. Though still experimental, the weapons were mounted on 4 small rebel ships, each crewed by inexperienced pilots. Ryan Brooks personally selected these crews, choosing those who showed promise during training. Among them was Jenna Cole, whose determination had earned her a spot despite her lack of experience. Before the mission, Ryan pulled her aside and said, "Stay sharp out there. You've got one job. Fire when you see an opening. Don't hesitate." As the rebel fleet approached the convoy, tension filled the air. The ship's engines hummed softly, masking the sound of nervous breathing inside cramped cockpits. Daniel Carter sat aboard one of the vessels, gripping the controls tightly. He wasn't a pilot by trade, but his experience as a soldier made him valuable in combat situations. Laura had begged him not to go, but he insisted. "If we don't start somewhere," he told her, "we'll never finish." When the convoy came into view, the rebels struck without warning. Plasma bolts shot through space, striking 2 supply ships with blinding flashes of light. The impact tore through their hulls, disabling them instantly. Chaos erupted among the remaining ships as Scytherian pilots scrambled to respond. The rebels used their smaller size and speed to their advantage, darting between larger vessels while avoiding return fire. Jenna fired her cannon for the first time, hitting a 3rd ship squarely in its engine compartment. Sparks erupted from the wounded vessel, sending it spiraling out of control. Her heart raced, but she forced herself to focus. "Nice shot," someone shouted over the comms. For a moment, pride replaced fear. But the battle wasn't won yet. One of the rebel ships took heavy damage, forcing its crew to retreat. Another narrowly avoided destruction thanks to quick maneuvers by its pilot. Despite their losses, the rebels pressed on, determined to complete their mission. When the final supply ship exploded in a fiery burst, cheers erupted across the fleet. They had done it. They had struck a blow against the Empire. Back on Earth, news of the victory spread like wildfire. People celebrated in the streets, lighting candles and singing songs of hope. Alex Monroe addressed a crowd in a bustling town square, praising the bravery of the fighters. "This is only the beginning," he declared. "Today, we showed the Empire that we are not weak. We are strong, united, and ready to reclaim our future." Governor Marcus Phelan, however, was furious. The loss of the supply ships embarrassed him, and he vowed to crush the rebellion swiftly. Reinforcements poured into Earth's orbit, turning the skies above the planet into a swarm of metallic warships. The Empire's retaliation began almost immediately, targeting settlements suspected of harboring rebels. Bombs rained down on villages, destroying homes and scattering families. Yet even in the face of such brutality, resistance only grew stronger. Daniel returned from the mission physically unharmed but emotionally drained. Seeing the aftermath of the Empire's attacks weighed heavily on him. Entire neighborhoods lay in ruins, their inhabitants reduced to ash. Children cried for parents who would never return. Laura greeted him at the edge of their settlement, her eyes red from crying. "Was it worth it?" she asked quietly. For a moment, Daniel didn't answer. He thought about Ethan, about the countless lives lost to the Empire's cruelty. Then he looked at his wife, at the resilience etched onto her face despite everything they'd endured. "We have to believe it is," he finally replied, "because giving up means letting them win." In secret bunkers and hidden workshops, preparations continued. Mia worked around the clock to improve her plasma cannons, ensuring they could withstand prolonged use in battle. Recruits trained harder than ever, knowing the next fight would be tougher. And Laura, though grieving, kept speaking to crowds, reminding them why they fought, not just for revenge, but for a world where no child would suffer as Ethan had. The war was far from over, but humanity had taken its first step toward freedom. Each victory, no matter how small, fueled their resolve. Together, they stood ready to face whatever came next, united by a shared dream of a better tomorrow. The rebellion's first victory gave humanity hope, but it also drew the full wrath of the Scytherian Empire. Governor Marcus Phalon could no longer ignore the uprising. To him, it was an insult, a stain on the Empire's reputation that needed to be erased quickly and brutally. He ordered a massive fleet to descend upon Earth, determined to crush the resistance once and for all. The rebels knew this day would come, but nothing could fully prepare them for the scale of the attack. New Chicago, one of Earth's largest cities, became the Empire's primary target. It was a strategic choice. The city housed factories secretly producing weapons for the UEC and served as a hub for rebel activity. When Scytherian ships appeared in the sky, their ominous shadows stretching across the streets below, panic erupted among the population. People ran for cover, clutching whatever belongings they could carry. Laura Carter stood at the center of the chaos, shouting instructions to evacuate civilians. Her voice cut through the noise, calm yet firm. Move quickly. Stick together. Don't look back. Daniel Carter led a squad of fighters tasked with holding the city's perimeter. Their job was to buy time for the evacuation, even if it meant sacrificing themselves. Armed with makeshift rifles and Mia Torres plasma cannons, they positioned themselves behind barricades made of scrap metal and rubble. Daniel glanced at his team, men and women who had never fought in a real battle before, and felt a pang of doubt. Could they hold their ground against the Empire's superior forces? The Exitherians launched their assault without mercy. Dropships descended like vultures, spilling soldiers onto the streets. These alien warriors were fast and relentless, their exoskeletons gleaming under the pale sunlight. They moved in perfect formation, firing energy weapons that tore through buildings and shattered defenses. The air filled with the sounds of explosions, screams, and gunfire. Despite being outnumbered, the rebels fought fiercely. Jenna Cole operated a plasma cannon mounted on a truck, her hand steady despite the chaos around her. She aimed carefully, targeting clusters of enemy troops. Each blast sent Scytherian soldiers sprawling, their glowing bodies collapsing into lifeless heaps. Keep firing. Ryan Brooks shouted from nearby, reloading his rifle. His voice carried both urgency and encouragement, urging the fighters to push harder. But the cost of resistance was high. One by one, Daniel's squad fell. Friends he had trained alongside crumpled to the ground, their faces frozen in expressions of pain or determination. Every loss hit him like a hammer, but he forced himself to keep moving. Stay focused, he muttered under his breath. For Ethan, for everyone. As the battle raged, Maya Torres worked frantically to turn the tide. She had stayed behind in New Chicago, knowing her technical expertise might make the difference between survival and defeat. Inside a crumbling power station, she rigged the city's electrical grid to overload. If successful, the resulting electromagnetic pulse would disable the Scytherians' advanced technology, at least temporarily. Sweat dripped down her face as she connected wires and adjusted settings, her fingers trembling but precise. Outside, Laura continued organizing evacuations. She refused to leave until every civilian was safe, ignoring pleas from others to retreat. "I won't abandon anyone," she snapped when someone tried to drag her away. Her courage inspired those around her, giving them strength to keep going despite the overwhelming odds. Finally, Mia activated the EMP. A surge of energy rippled outward, engulfing the battlefield in a blinding flash. The Exitherian weapons sputtered and died, leaving their soldiers disoriented and vulnerable. Seizing the opportunity, the rebels launched a counterattack. Plasma bolts and bullets rained down on the invaders, driving them back toward their dropships. Cheers erupted among the defenders, but the celebration was short-lived. Much of New Chicago lay in ruins, its skyline reduced to jagged skeletons of broken buildings. When the dust settled, Daniel surveyed the devastation. Bodies littered the streets, both human and alien. The victory had come at a terrible price, but it proved something important. Humanity could fight back. As he joined Laura and the survivors, he felt a flicker of hope amidst the grief. They had held their ground against the Empire, and that meant they could do it again. The war was far from over, but the rebels now knew they weren't fighting a losing battle. Together, they vowed to keep pushing forward, no matter the cost. The victory in New Chicago gave the United Earth Coalition, UEC, a much-needed boost, but it also exposed cracks within their ranks. As the rebels regrouped in hidden bases and makeshift camps, disagreements began to surface. Some leaders argued that humanity should negotiate with the Exetherians, seeking peace before more lives were lost. Others believed surrender was impossible and pushed for even bolder attacks, no matter the cost. These debates created tension among the coalition, threatening to undo the fragile unity they had built. Daniel Carter found himself caught in the middle of these arguments. He understood both sides. His own heart was torn between his desire to protect what remained of humanity and his growing thirst for justice. Laura, however, stood firmly against compromise. "Peace with monsters is no peace at all," she told him one evening, her voice firm despite the exhaustion etched on her face. "If we stop now, Ethan's death, and everyone else's, will have been for nothing." Amidst this internal strife, troubling rumors began to spread. Supplies meant for rebel fighters went missing, and plans for upcoming missions seemed to reach the Exetherians faster than expected. Whispers of betrayal rippled through the camps. Suspicion fell on Chris Lane, a logistics officer responsible for managing resources. Chris had always been quiet, keeping to himself, but his behavior lately raised questions. He often disappeared for hours at a time, claiming he was inspecting supply routes, yet no one could confirm where he went. Alex Monroe decided to investigate. Alongside Ryan Brooks, he confronted Chris late one night in a dimly lit storage bunker. At first, Chris denied any wrongdoing, his voice shaky but defiant. But when Alex pressed him with evidence, a trail of intercepted communications linking him to the Exetherians, Chris broke down. Tears streamed down his face as he confessed. "They promised me safety," he stammered. "My family. They said they'd kill them if I didn't help." Chris revealed devastating information. The Exetherians were planning a nuclear strike on Earth's capital city, aiming to destroy the UEC's leadership and demoralize the resistance. The attack was imminent, set to occur within days. The news sent shockwaves through the coalition. Panic threatened to take hold, but Alex quickly rallied everyone. "We've come too far to fall apart now," he declared. "If we act fast, we can stop this." Mia Torres sprang into action, working alongside engineers to devise a plan to intercept the weapon. Using data provided by Sam Welch's spy network, they pinpointed the missile's trajectory and launch site. It would be nearly impossible to stop it once it entered Earth's atmosphere, so the rebels had to act before it launched. A small team volunteered for the dangerous mission, including Daniel, Ryan, and Jenna Cole. As the team prepared to depart, Laura approached Daniel. Her eyes were filled with worry, but she didn't ask him to stay. Instead, she placed a hand on his shoulder and said softly, "Bring them home." Daniel nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. He knew the risks. They all did, but there was no turning back. The mission took them deep into enemy territory, navigating treacherous terrain under the cover of darkness. They moved silently, avoiding patrols of Exetherian soldiers stationed near the launch site. When they finally reached the facility housing the missile, Mia's technical expertise proved invaluable. She hacked into the control systems, disabling security measures while guiding the team through narrow corridors, lined with blinking lights and humming machinery. Time was running out. The countdown timer on the missile's console ticked steadily downward, each second bringing them closer to catastrophe. Just as Ryan disabled the final lock securing the weapon, alarms blared throughout the facility. Exetherian guards swarmed toward them, weapons drawn. Chaos erupted as the team fought to hold their ground, buying Mia enough time to reprogram the missile's targeting system. With shaking hands, she redirected it harmlessly into space. When the mission was over, the team escaped just moments before the facility collapsed in a fiery explosion. Exhausted but victorious, they returned to base, knowing they had saved countless lives. Yet the victory came with a heavy price. Trust within the coalition had been shaken, and the looming threat of the Empire still hung over them like a storm cloud. Despite everything, though, one thing was clear. Humanity's resolve burned brighter than ever. The interception of the Exetherian missile was a turning point for the United Earth Coalition, UEC. It proved that humanity could outsmart the Empire, even when the odds seemed impossible. News of the mission spread quickly, lifting spirits across Earth. People celebrated the narrow escape from disaster, but they also understood that the war was far from over. The rebels had won a battle, not the war. Back at their hidden base, Daniel Carter and his team were hailed as heroes. Laura hugged him tightly when he returned, tears streaming down her face. "You did it," she whispered, her voice trembling with relief. But Daniel didn't feel like a hero. He couldn't stop thinking about the lives lost along the way. The friends who had died in New Chicago, the civilians caught in a crossfire, and now Chris Lane's betrayal. Every victory came at a cost, and Daniel wondered how much more humanity could endure. Mia Torres worked tirelessly to improve the Coalition's defenses. She knew the Exetherians wouldn't give up easily. If anything, their failures only made them angrier and more dangerous. Using the data recovered from the missile facility, Mia studied the Empire's technology, looking for weaknesses. Her goal was simple: find ways to strike back harder and smarter. With each new discovery, she grew more confident. "We're learning their moves," she told Alex Monroe during one late-night meeting. "Soon, we'll be able to hit them where it hurts." Alex nodded, though his expression remained grim. As the leader of the UEC, he carried the weight of every decision on his shoulders. He knew the next phase of the war would require sacrifices, more lives, more resources, more risks. Yet, despite the challenges ahead, he refused to let despair take hold. "We've shown them we can fight," he said firmly. "Now we need to show them we can win." To prepare for the coming battles, Ryan Brooks trained pilots relentlessly. He pushed them to their limits, teaching them advanced maneuvers and tactics. Jenna Cole, now a skilled pilot thanks to her experience in the missile interception mission, became one of his top students. She practiced day and night, determined to prove herself worthy of the trust placed in her. "This isn't just about flying," Ryan reminded her during one session. "It's about staying alive long enough to make a difference." Meanwhile, Laura Carter continued to rally people across Earth. Her speeches inspired hope, but they also served another purpose: gathering support for the rebellion. Villages and towns sent supplies, volunteers, and messages of encouragement. Some even donated old machinery or tools that could be repurposed into weapons. Every contribution mattered, no matter how small. Together, these efforts strengthened the Coalition's resolve. The UEC launched a series of bold offensives, targeting key Exetherian outposts near Earth. Using guerrilla tactics, small rebel fleets struck quickly and retreated before reinforcements arrived. Each successful raid boosted morale and weakened the Empire's grip. For the first time, humanity began to gain ground. The Exetherians, once arrogant and dismissive, started to realize they were facing a real threat. Governor Marcus Valon watched these developments with growing frustration. His superiors demanded results, accusing him of incompetence. Desperate to regain control, Valon ordered massive retaliation strikes against rebel strongholds. Entire settlements were wiped out, their ruins left as warnings to others. But instead of breaking humanity's spirit, these attacks only fueled their determination. Survivors joined the rebellion, vowing to avenge their lost homes and loved ones. As the war intensified, Daniel found himself leading more missions. Each one tested his courage and resolve. He often thought about Ethan, wondering if his son would have been proud of what he was doing. The pain of losing him never faded, but it drove Daniel forward. "We're fighting for something bigger than ourselves," he told his squad before one mission. "For freedom. For the future." Though battered and bruised, humanity stood united. They had faced unimaginable horrors and emerged stronger. The road ahead was still long and uncertain, but the rebels clung to one truth. They were no longer afraid. Together, they prepared for the final push, a daring assault on the heart of the Exitherian Empire itself. The United Earth Coalition, UEC, knew the time had come to take the fight directly to the Exitherian Empire. For months, they had been planning a daring assault on the Empire's homeworld, a move that could decide the fate of both species. It was a gamble, but humanity had no other choice. If they failed, the Exitherians would crush them completely. If they succeeded, it could mean freedom for Earth and an end to centuries of oppression. Mia Torres played a crucial role in preparing for the mission. She worked around the clock, upgrading the rebel fleet with her plasma cannons and designing new weapons capable of penetrating the Empire's strongest defenses. Her hands were raw from handling tools, and her eyes burned from lack of sleep, but she refused to slow down. "This is our chance," she told Alex Monroe during one late-night meeting. "We have to make sure we're ready." Alex agreed, though the weight of leadership pressed heavily on him. He spent hours poring over maps and battle plans, trying to anticipate every possible outcome. The journey to the Exitherian homeworld would be perilous, filled with ambushes and traps set by the enemy. Alex knew many wouldn't return, but he also knew they couldn't afford to hesitate. "If we don't act now," he said to Ryan Brooks, "we'll lose everything we fought for." Ryan took charge of training the pilots for the long voyage ahead. He drilled them endlessly, teaching them how to navigate asteroid fields, evade enemy ships, and conserve fuel. Jenna Cole became one of his most trusted pilots, her skills improving with each practice run. Despite her fear of what lay ahead, she remained determined. "I didn't come this far to give up now," she told Ryan after a particularly grueling session. "Whatever happens, I'm ready." As the fleet prepared for departure, Laura Carter traveled from base to base, speaking to the soldiers and their families. She understood the enormity of what they were about to do and wanted to remind everyone why they were fighting. Standing before a crowd of nervous recruits, she held up a photograph of Ethan. "This isn't just about revenge," she said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "It's about hope, for all of us. For the children who deserve a better world than the one we've known." Daniel stood beside her, listening silently. He felt a mix of pride and dread as he watched his wife inspire others. Deep down, he wondered if he'd ever see her again. When Laura finished speaking, she turned to him and smiled faintly. "Promise me you'll come back," she said quietly. Daniel nodded, pulling her into a tight embrace. "I promise," he whispered, though he wasn't sure he believed it himself. Finally, the day of departure arrived. The rebel fleet gathered in orbit above Earth, a patchwork collection of ships built from scraps and determination. Pilots climbed into their cockpits, mechanics made last-minute adjustments, and engineers double-checked every system. As the engines roared to life, cheers erupted from those left behind, echoing through the silence of space. The journey was anything but smooth. Almost immediately, the fleet encountered Cytherian patrols. Small skirmishes broke out, forcing the rebels to divert course repeatedly. Supplies dwindled faster than expected, and tempers flared as exhaustion set in. But through it all, the resolve of the crew never wavered. They reminded themselves of what they were fighting for: freedom, justice, and a future worth living for. When they finally reached the Cytherian system, the sight of the Empire's homeworld took their breath away. It was a massive planet surrounded by towering warships and fortified stations. The rebels knew they were outnumbered and outgunned, but they also knew retreat wasn't an option. As Mia's plasma cannons powered up, and the first wave of rebel ships charged toward the enemy, Daniel gripped the controls of his vessel tightly. His heart pounded in his chest, but his mind was clear. They had come too far to turn back now. Whatever happened next, humanity was ready to face it head-on. The battle for the Exitherian homeworld began with a deafening roar. As the rebel fleet approached, Exitherian warships surged forward like a swarm of angry insects, their weapons blazing. Bright beams of energy streaked across space, lighting up the darkness as they clashed with humanity's smaller, scrappier vessels. The rebels had trained for this moment, but nothing could fully prepare them for the chaos of such a massive fight. Taurus plasma cannons proved to be a game-changer. When the first wave of rebel ships unleashed their firepower, the bolts tore through the thick armor of Exitherian cruisers, leaving gaping holes in their hulls. Cheers erupted among the human fighters, but the celebration was short-lived. The Empire's forces regrouped quickly, launching counterattacks that pushed the rebels back. Explosions lit up the void as ships on both sides were destroyed, sending debris spiraling into the endless blackness. Jenna Cole piloted her ship with skill and determination, weaving through enemy fire while targeting their weakest points. Her hands trembled on the controls, but she focused on Ryan Brooks' words, "Stay sharp, keep moving." Every time her plasma cannon fired, she thought of her younger brother, taken by the Empire years ago. This wasn't just a battle, it was personal. She refused to let fear slow her down. Daniel Carter led his squad into the heart of the fray, guiding them toward one of the largest Exitherian dreadnoughts guarding the planet below. The ship bristled with weapons, its surface gleaming under the dim light of a distant star. Taking it out would weaken the Empire's defenses significantly, but getting close enough to attack seemed impossible. Daniel knew hesitation meant death. "Follow me," he shouted over the comms, pushing his ship into a daring dive. The maneuver caught the Exitherians off guard, allowing Daniel's team to slip past their outer defenses. Plasma bolts struck the dreadnought's engines, causing explosions that rippled along its frame. For a moment, it looked like they might succeed, but then disaster struck. One of the rebel ships veered off course, colliding with an enemy vessel. The resulting blast sent shockwaves through the battlefield, damaging several nearby ships, including Daniel's. Inside his cockpit, alarms blared as smoke filled the air. His vision blurred, but he forced himself to stay conscious. Grabbing the controls, he guided his battered ship away from the wreckage, narrowly avoiding further destruction. When he finally emerged from the chaos, he saw something remarkable. The Exitherian dreadnought was collapsing, its structure crumbling under the relentless assault. Cheers erupted among the rebels, though they knew the fight was far from over. Back at command, Alex Monroe coordinated the next phase of the attack. Using data gathered during the initial skirmishes, Mia identified key targets on the planet's surface: command centers, supply depots, and communication hubs. If they could disable these, the Empire's ability to coordinate its forces would crumble. Small strike teams were dispatched to carry out the missions, each one knowing the odds were against them. Laura Carter waited anxiously aboard a support vessel, helping tend to wounded soldiers brought in from the front lines. Her hand shook as she bandaged cuts and burns, but her voice remained steady. "You're going to make it," she told a young pilot bleeding heavily from his side. He smiled weakly before slipping into unconsciousness. Laura clenched her fists, vowing not to let despair take hold. Humanity had come too far to give up now. As the battle raged on, Governor Marcus Valon watched helplessly from his command center. His once unstoppable fleet was faltering, and his own people began to question his leadership. Panic set in as reports flooded in about rebel forces breaching planetary defenses. Knowing defeat was imminent, Valon ordered a desperate retreat, abandoning his post to save himself. By the time the dust settled, the rebels had secured a hard-fought victory. The Exitherian homeworld lay in ruins, its towering cities reduced to smoldering wrecks. Though many lives had been lost, humanity stood triumphant. Exhausted but determined, the survivors gathered to honor those who had fallen. They had paid a heavy price, but their sacrifice had paved the way for freedom. As Daniel gazed at the damaged planet below, he felt a mix of sorrow and hope. The war was over, but the work of rebuilding had only just begun. Together, humanity vowed to create a better future, not just for themselves, but for all beings in the galaxy. The war was over, but the scars it left behind ran deep. The Exitherian Empire, once a symbol of unyielding power, had fallen. Its homeworld lay in ruins, its leaders scattered or captured. Governor Marcus Valon was found hiding in a bunker, his arrogance replaced by fear as he faced justice for his crimes. Humanity's victory was hard-won, paid for with blood, sweat, and countless sacrifices. But amid the wreckage and loss, there was hope, a fragile but undeniable sense that a new chapter was beginning. Back on Earth, celebrations erupted in cities and villages alike. People danced in the streets, sang songs, and lit candles in memory of those who had given their lives. Laura Carter stood at the center of it all, her voice carrying strength even as tears streamed down her face. She held Ethan's photograph close to her heart, whispering, "We did it, my love. Your life wasn't taken in vain." Around her, others carried pictures of their own lost loved ones, united by grief and gratitude. Daniel watched the celebrations from a distance, leaning against a crumbling wall. He felt pride in what they had achieved, but also a hollow ache that no amount of cheering could fill. Too many friends had died along the way, people who would never see this day. Still, he reminded himself of Laura's words. The fight hadn't been just for revenge. It had been for freedom. For the first time in years, Earth felt like a place where humanity could truly live, not just survive. Mia Torres returned to her workshop, though now it was less about building weapons and more about creating tools for rebuilding. Her plasma cannons were dismantled, their parts repurposed into machines that could purify water, generate electricity, and repair damaged infrastructure. "We've destroyed enough," she told Alex Monroe one evening. "Now it's time to build something better." Together, they worked tirelessly to restore Earth's shattered cities, focusing on sustainability and unity rather than division. Alex played a key role in shaping humanity's future. As a leader, he pushed for reforms that ensured everyone had a voice, not just soldiers or politicians, but farmers, teachers, and ordinary citizens. Town hall meetings became common, giving people a chance to share ideas and concerns. Slowly but surely, trust began to grow between communities that had once been divided. "This isn't just about surviving anymore," Alex said during one gathering. "It's about thriving together." Ryan Brooks struggled to adjust to peacetime. After decades of fighting, he didn't know how to exist without conflict. At first, he kept to himself, tinkering with old ships and avoiding crowds. But Jenna Cole refused to let him fade into solitude. "You helped us win this war," she told him firmly. "Now help us learn how to live without it." With her encouragement, Ryan began teaching young pilots not about combat, but about exploration, how to navigate the stars with curiosity instead of fear. Jenna herself dreamed of venturing beyond Earth, eager to discover what else the galaxy held. She joined a group of explorers tasked with charting uncharted systems, hoping to find new allies and resources. Before leaving, she visited Laura and Daniel, thanking them for inspiring her to keep going when things seemed impossible. "We've only scratched the surface," she said with a smile. "There's so much more out there." As humanity looked toward the future, they vowed never to repeat the mistakes of the past. The fall of the Exitherian Empire served as a reminder of what unchecked power could do, and Earth's leaders pledged to build a society based on equality and cooperation. Monuments were erected not just to honor fallen heroes, but also to remind future generations of the cost of war and the value of peace. For Daniel and Laura, life slowly began to heal. They planted new crops in their fields, nurturing the soil as they nurtured their hopes for the future. Though Ethan's absence still lingered, his memory lived on in every step forward they took. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Laura turned to Daniel and said softly, "He'd be proud of us." And she was right. Somewhere, somehow, Ethan's spirit smiled upon them all, a quiet testament to the resilience of humanity and the enduring power of hope.